I'm going to do this again. I don't want to see twos in the chat. Who wants to hear the first page of my dad's journal from 2019? The classic chestnut reading Thorp literature. He's like 50, just the way you like him. July 22nd, 2019, continued. Grace offers a different energy. An energy that is sweet, kind, pleasurable, relaxed, self-indulgent. A break, a relief from Courtney's energy. At a certain point a few months ago, that energy, that invitation was incredibly attractive to me as a way of avoiding an imminent descent into depression. I hoped I could accept her invitation and then turn those energies outward. And then turn those energies toward what I have always wanted to do, which is to figure things out, make some plans to get out of unhealthy patterns, and then execute those plans. But perhaps I shouldn't have accepted her invitation on her terms, but should have insisted from the start that our relationship respects my proper role as father. Instead, I tried to substitute for Mom, instead of directing her to resolve that directly with Mom. Though honestly, I'm not sure how I could have really done that. And now she's spinning and seems to have lost confidence in me as well as in Mom. 3:45 p.m. the same day. I had a good energy. Things seemed to be moving forward. Then Grace got up and I tried to talk with her, then with her and Mom, and I ended up just utterly exhausted. I lost sight of what it was that I was doing, the goodness of it, the importance of it, logic, planning. All that stuff seemed cold or cruel or too much. I started watching YouTube videos, and now I just want to go back there to escape. The funny thing is, prior to that conversation, to confronting that female energy, I was pretty happy, felt like I was making good progress, etc. I had a vision of putting things into a system and dealing with them, of coming up with a plan and living according to that plan. Now I just want to sleep, sleep, sleep. I thought Grace was going to be my sounding board. I thought she was going to help me pursue the goals of being a strong father. And then it trails off and he says in brackets, lost energy again. 4:15 p.m. Okay, so I'm trying to tap back into my natural father energy, but having trouble doing so. All right. What year did he write this? This is from July of 2019, so 5 years ago. All right, are you guys tantalized? Are you tantalized? Do you want to hear more? I have lots more to go through. Are you tantalized? One's in chat if you want to hear more. Are you interested? Make it into a book? Yeah. Yes. Ones. Forward by Jordan Peterson. It's nice to hear it in bed. I imagine Ben writing this by candlelight in the dead of night. It's like getting a bedtime story. Okay. I'm going to e-bag in between each page. Okay. Because, wait, hang on. I set this up wrong. We don't need much, okay? We don't need much. But in order to make this content happen, we have been sort of strung out. You guys know, if I check my Cash App right now, I have, let's see. Oh, I transferred it. But I had 100 in there. We spent 36 on diesel, so 64. Yeah, I've $64 in the Cash App, which is barely enough to get the diesel to go home. Plus, we also need to, like, obviously eat. And we can sleep in the RV. I think it's like, I think we're like maybe 11 hours away from home, maybe 10 at this point. I'm going to give between each page. If you could send anything to the Cash App to just help us get home, okay? We've been really putting it out there for you guys. We've been doing consistent like 10, 12, 15-hour streams with different people. And it would just really help to just cover the diesel so that we can get back. Can you make up parts to spice it up? I can send another $1 if you say the magic word. Running out of gas would be great content. No, this is great content, Amsterdamish. Running out of gas would suck. Would suck. That's not true. So I'll keep tabs on the Cash App. I would really appreciate it, but I'll keep going. I'm just gonna e-beg in between each page. Okay. This is his handwriting, by the way. Oh shoot, I have low Wi-Fi. Can you guys see? Like a goddamn founding father up in this biddy. All right, page 2, Thursday, July 25, 2019. It starts 8:13 a.m., but then it's just ... So I guess he was gonna write something and then he just didn't have the energy. 10:14 a.m. Today marks, I think, a new day in our lives. Yesterday, I got hugely thrown off by Grace's recent desperate exhaustion, and I gave in to her disordered desire to just want to be close with me for hours on end. Late last night, I sent Mom into her room to watch TV with her and hopefully help her get to sleep. I can't let that energy throw me off again today. I need to restore my proper energies today, and I think I can do that. 10:47 a.m. Thank you, Jesus. I've overcome some of the energies that were pushing me down, making me tired earlier today. 11:18 a.m. The good energies keep coming back in, then I get tired from the bad patterns raising their ugly head. It's a battle. I'd like to look at a fundamental issue, and there's a colon, but there's nothing written after it. Okay, next day, Friday, July 26, 2019. 7:52 a.m. So thankfully I got up nice and early this morning. Last night I finally tapped into some really great energy. I think the long battle against the fundamental dysfunctionality in this family is finally over. I think Courtney's destructive energy has finally been replaced with a spirit of obedience and submission. And the disordered situation with Grace has begun to be straightened out. Now I want to jump into that functional energy, that functional situation, and bring order from the chaos. So as I see it, my goal today is to stay in that positive functional energy. It's not so much an issue of fortitude as it is an issue of prudence. This is the big question. Is the disorder that's apparent on every level of this family a product of my dysfunctional relationship with Courtney, parentheses, which I think has been fundamentally straightened out, end parentheses, or is it a product, as Courtney had thought, of my fundamental inability to overcome the wounds inflicted upon me by my parents, etc.? Dash, am I just crazy, unable to act as a father, a husband, a man? I really think it's the former, but I think that will only manifest itself in the reality of our lives. There's no point really in worrying about it too much. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders, the weight of Courtney actively undermining my proper role within this family. Has that weight weakened me? Undoubtedly. Has it fundamentally destroyed me? No, I don't think it has. I think I can bounce back fairly quickly from that weight, and I'm hoping to experience waves of gratitude and hope and lightness and positive energy. Exhaustion, dash, that's my issue. Not quite depression, but exhaustion. But also great hope. Lord, help me to be strengthened in my weakness. Help me to tap into all the hope and optimism and goodness and beauty, and not be overwhelmed by doubt and negativity and fear and all the demons that bring me out of the light and into darkness and despair. Seems eminently doable. Smiley face. I want to smile. That's what I want to do. I haven't been able to smile in a very, very long time. All right. Continuing. Monday, August 12th. So we're skipping, this is like 8, 9, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 6, 7, 8, 10. Like 20 days ahead. 10:10 a.m. So this morning, at the beginning of the week, presents huge challenges, but also huge opportunities. The sense of huge opportunities comes from two experiences in the past week. First, on Wednesday or Thursday, we as a family were able to get our energies right, to tap into some positive experiences and make the day work. The second positive experience was yesterday, Sunday. We were able, despite some difficulties, and despite my waking up with tremendous anxious energy, we were able to get ourselves together and go down to Newport and take a big walk and enjoy the water, and get to Mass, and get home, and get the Airbnb cleaned, and get to sleep at more reasonable times. That experience, in turn, flowed out of the experience we had Saturday afternoon of going down to my dad's house and visiting with him and Mom and Pete. It was a strangely positive experience for us because the three of them were sort of on their worst behavior, but our family stood out in contrast as so fundamentally full of goodness and healthiness, and good humor and good sense. These three experiences were interspersed with tougher experiences which oscillated between hacking, anxious, driven energy towards a goal, and exhaustion, feeling outside of things, disconnected, alienated, inclined towards escape, hopeless, desperate. Saturday night, it occurred to me that we could employ a new strategy which might avoid those extremes and allow us to live in the warm, cheerful space between them. First, to understand and trust that the energy and desire to make things better is fundamentally there. Second, to really emphasize that rather than having all of the weight on the world on my shoulders, or Courtney's or Grace's, that each one of the 8 of us needs to individually buy in to our family life, not to feel like victims who need their parents to convince them that life is fundamentally good and worth living. I mean, I don't know. I don't think this is crazy. I think this is clearly somebody who's frustrated, who's in a situation that he keeps trying to find like a positive angle on, but it keeps getting tripped up. This seems like the journal of somebody who's frustrated, who's confused, who's stuck in a situation that he's trying desperately to make sense of, but can't quite, pull together. This is the least riveting Ben content imaginable. Suffer. It seems Wednesday, August 21st, still 2019. 11:43 a.m. I'm in kind of a tough place right now, to be honest. But I'm really happy to have turned to this journal, which can, I think, be a tool to help sort some of this stuff out. Okay, so here's the situation that I'm having trouble with, : On Monday, I felt somewhat strengthened to work with the boys instead of oscillating between jumping in and spending a lot of time outside of things, watching TV, sleeping, or chatting with Mom or Grace. So then Mom mentioned the 3rd floor toilet, and I said, okay, let's just hit that. Huge disaster. The toilet flange was utterly destroyed, and leaking water had caused significant damage to the subfloor. Emergency mode, : Okay, let's start ripping out the subfloor to figure out how deep and wide the water damage is. Then, of course, replace that flooring, retile over it, and we're back in business. Okay, so me and the boys meaning I would assume 3 brothers. I don't know about Joey. Joey would have been like 7 years old. Maybe him too. Probably John, Charlie, and Tom. Okay, so me and the boys worked feverishly to get the subfloor up, but we've got someone coming in at 4, and at 2:30, I could see we just weren't going to make it. We got a lot done and worked mostly very reasonably, but it just wasn't going to happen. So at 2:30, I kind of turned to Courtney and called it. Quote, it's just not going to happen in this time frame. We contacted that night's guest and the Airbnb people, and we were able to cancel the reservation. So then things moved into the second stage. Okay, we have another day to do this job. First thing, I sort of half fell asleep when I was sitting. Then we laid out what needed to happen, and we set ourselves up with a reasonable task for the rest of that day, Monday, and put the rest off for Tuesday. So I said, let's just remove. First thing, I sort of half fell asleep where I was sitting. Then we laid out what needed to happen, and we set ourselves up with a reasonable task for the rest of that day, Monday, and put the rest off for Tuesday. So I said, let's just remove the rest of the subfloor tonight, and tomorrow we'll replace the removed subfloor, patch it up, and install new VCT tiles. And we got that job done, cleaned up, and left it for the next day. I was so exhausted from that day that I drifted off to sleep without too much trouble. Praise God. So the next morning, I'm up a little after 6 a.m., full of tension. I got Courtney up and talked with her for a while, over 2 hours, about the state I was in. Parentheses, fear, fear, fear. At one point in our conversation, she was saying something like, quote, I used to spend hours worrying about stuff, but then I tried to simply trust in God, end quote. And I misinterpreted her as saying that hashing things out mentally and recognizing psychological patterns, which is what I was doing, was a, quote, waste of time, and that what was really necessary was a sort of anti-intellectual leap of faith. It's funny because it was really hard to get back into it after that. It felt like a short circuit that couldn't be repaired. After all, if the problem is thinking, then how can you think about how to overcome that problem? That's one of the big tropes of Protestantism, Calvinism, etc. Anyways, we were able to recover and went over to tackle the actual job. We had a great time. The boys enthusiastically jumped in. We helped quite a bit, and we did a great job. I think while I was out, I guess the hot water expansion tank in the basement exploded. Parentheses equals no water pressure in the entire house. Okay, then is this the next day? Let's see. The next day, Thursday, August 22nd. Still 2019. 12:38 p.m. Crazy day yesterday. Crazy night last night. I basically rested all day yesterday. Rested from the tumult. How do you spell the tumult of Monday and Tuesday, which represented a huge challenge to my psychic well-being. But a challenge that, with Courtney's generous and loving and gentle help, and the help of the kids, who were super great, I was able to handle way better than I've ever handled such a situation in the past. It still was incredibly difficult and put enormous strain on me, but there were elements of healthiness throughout the ordeal, including the journaling I did yesterday. Despite the fact that, yes, I couldn't stay in a good place all day yesterday and gave in to self-destructive patterns of behavior several times. Okay, but what I really want to focus on is what happened last night. So I've been treating Grace pretty poorly during those stressful days, which I think had to do with a deep resentment I had about her manipulating me over the past few months. Not a 100% excuse, but really relevant. So then I was inclined to make it up to her last night by being really nice and indulgent towards her. So we watched AI, which is the movie, although I didn't really want to, and I drifted off to sleep around 10 to 10:15 p.m. I found myself up at 1 o'clock, and since Courtney ... it ends there. Okay, this is the next day. 10:52 a.m. So I got up relatively early this morning, something like 8:30. I screwed up over the past few days. I got up and chatted with Courtney for a while. Though I woke up feeling pretty optimistic, I soon found myself wrestling with the same problem I've been wrestling with day after day for many, many years. The problem of feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. I think essentially I am today exhausted because the past 4 days have been incredibly challenging. Monday and Tuesday, I had an experience of a can of worms in terms of a practical situation with the third floor bathroom. That experience challenged my psychological stability on every level, but I tried really hard to stay calm and act rationally and prudently, and I think I did a great job. It was a success on every level and brought me much closer to Courtney. Then on Wednesday, the challenge shifted. Rather than the can of worms being the challenge, I was challenged by the can of worms aftermath. Processing the PTSD-like state I, of course, was left with because of the stress of Monday and Tuesday. I tried again to avoid seeming surprised by that state and tried to roll with it and see it as a part of the process and be patient with the irrationality. The crazy impulse to assert control, etc., to feel better through stupid shortcuts, etc. An ugly process, but again, I was determined to hang in and stick with my second narrative. that there are incredibly tricky and deeply ingrained patterns that undermine my sense of order and optimism and hope, but that those patterns can be overcome by recognizing them and recognizing that they don't make any sense, and then affirming that other patterns can make sense and recognizing the difficulty of changing those deeply ingrained patterns and celebrate the small victories along the way. So I'm exhausted from the experience of those 4 days, or so I felt. Oh no, I left out the hardest part. So Wednesday, I tried to stay in the narrative, but wound up waking up at 1 a.m., feeling much more confident and optimistic. Since Courtney had fallen asleep, I thought I'd keep Grace company as she had been having terrible trouble getting to sleep at a reasonable time. However, at a certain point, she allowed frustration to get the better of her and she lashed out, and things got crazy. After she went to sleep, I came back in the bedroom and talked it through with Courtney for several hours, and finally went back to sleep at a crazy hour. Woke up in the afternoon feeling really chaotic, then had a good nap, talked things through with both Grace and Courtney. Tuesday, August 27th, 2019, 2:04 p.m. So today I'm feeling a tremendous desire to throw off the suffocating, exhausting net that Grace has cast over my soul. And I say that in two ways. Grace has cast this net or spell or whatever over my soul and not vice versa. I have basically been the victim of this movement and not vice versa. The way in which I've been culpable has been the extent to which I, as a parent, have allowed ... trails off. Okay, so then the next day, Wednesday, August 28th, 10:53 a.m. Okay, so yesterday I had a tremendous success in dealing with this energy I was experiencing with Grace. I spent a large portion of the day extremely agitated and had several conversations with Courtney about, number one, whether my agitation made sense. Is there a big problem in my relationship with Grace? And number two, if the agitation made sense, what to do about it? Basically, the question was whether to A, bring it up to her and have a conversation about it, or to B, allow the tension/aloofness to trigger her to bring it up. In the end, I went with the first option mostly, and I was able to introduce to her the idea that basically she meaning Grace, has been lashing out in anger at both her parents, at mom explicitly, but also at me by manipulating me into feeling guilty in order to have me become her quasi-slave. On a related note, I think my experience this past week was dominated by the issue of finding space for myself. The third floor bathroom issue found me in the position of nearly losing all space for myself, (panic mode), lasted into Tuesday. Then Wednesday, even though I took some space back by not finishing the floor, I found myself nonetheless with very little space. There's the rub. That's absolutely the key. It makes all the sense in the world that I had difficulty finding some space for myself that day, but I also experienced that situation as something of a surprise and disappointment, rather than as a natural consequence of not having found much space the previous 2 days. So Monday, I had an experience I haven't had in a while, the experience of absolute aversion, which I now interpret as my soul rebelling against my mind's refusal to give myself some space. Always, I'm finding myself asking the same question. Is life fundamentally irrational, or even malevolent, or is it fundamentally rational? If it's fundamentally irrational, it seems the proper response, even though this doesn't make any sense, would be to impose order upon the irrationality through the exercise of will. On the other hand, if life is fundamentally rational, then the proper response would be to find the rationality and goodness and beauty in the midst of what appears to be irrationality. Actually, to go back to the response to irrationality, there would be an equally natural response to try to maximize one's pleasure in the midst of the irrationality, to greedily grab whatever fleeting goodies make themselves available within the disorderedness as the best one can do. A good test of whether I'm trying to impose order on what I believe to be a fundamentally irrational existence is whether the impetus comes from an act of will or from the exercise of reason, which are fundamentally different starting points. The exercise of reason tends to be calm, humorous, curious, open, warm, and spacious, while the exercise of will tends to be harsh, narrow, angry, excited, and anti-intellectual. Okay, so now, let's be honest, I'm running into a problem. The problem I always have when pursuing rationality. I get tired. Especially because when I journal, it tends to be because I've experienced a lot of difficulty and things are very unclear. I put too much pressure on myself, and then I can easily conclude that it's not working. To employ an analogy, if one is chopping a path with a machete through thick bush, which one is convinced will lead out of the jungle and put one back on a well-paved road to a much-desired destination, one could run into several difficulties. Number one, if one starts doubting whether the path actually leads out, one might stop and try to make the most of the situation. 2. If one gets tired without losing faith in the path leading out, one might question one's desire to leave the jungle, convince oneself that one must keep chopping until one is out. 3. One could feel angry or overwhelmed at finding oneself in this situation to begin with, and feel the urge to blame oneself on someone else, so that even emerging from that terrible situation can't be enjoyed, but is only used as a weapon. However, there is a clean, rational way to respond to these difficulties. Number 1, are you doubting this path because you have reason to doubt it? Why did you choose it in the first place, if not because you thought it the best bet? 2, the experience of an initial hope and excitement giving way to exhaustion isn't necessarily a sign that the path is wrong, but rather a sign that it may be a bigger job than you initially planned for. This isn't despair, in my opinion. This is like scrambling to figure something out, not despair. But like inclinations to despair, yeah. Okay, number 2, the experience of an initial hope and excitement giving way to exhaustion isn't necessarily a sign that the path is wrong, but rather a sign that it may be a bigger job than you initially planned for. The solution would be to recalibrate your efforts by exercising simple prudence. Take breaks, maybe sharpen the machete, maybe simply recognizing that it may be a longer path. Number 3, why would anyone want to be in this terrible position? Monday, September 2, Labor Day. 10:29 a.m. So today's the last day of summer, and Grace and John are going back off to school tomorrow. What a crazy summer it's been, but I'm also hoping a really good summer as well. I haven't journaled since last Wednesday. I've been incredibly exhausted since then. On Tuesday, I think I finally resolved the situation with Grace. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and yesterday, Sunday, seem right now like just a blur but I think I should be able to make some sense of that time. So let's try. Okay, yesterday, I woke up feeling euphoric. My pre-wake-up dreams were dreams of euphoric liberation. I got up and talked with Courtney for a while, then I got super tired and sort of half slept in bed until around 5 p.m. When I got up again, talked again with Courtney for a while about how crazy I was feeling, and had a pretty okay evening. On Saturday, I had a pretty big day of activity. I had to get up and go to the dentist. Brutal. Then take the kids to see Mel on Great Island. Then hang out with Courtney in the interim. Then pick them up again and head back home. I was extremely crabby during my time alone with Courtney, just extremely averse to everything. I got home, went upstairs, still feeling crabby, and about an hour later just conked out without warning. Parentheses, I went down hard. Armand says, euphoric or exhausted, no in between. Yes, he did have symptoms of bipolar back then. Yes. So that's.
Euphoria.
Oh, he says euphoria is not a symptom of being bipolar. Oh, I guess it's mania, not euphoria. Yeah, that's true. So that still leaves Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. On Wednesday morning, I obviously did some journaling, and I can remember feeling pretty optimistic about it. I came up with this machete analogy and talked with Courtney about it for a while, but then I think I got extremely tired. Thursday morning, I remember Courtney had a dentist appointment at 10:30, and I was sort of freaking out about the prospect of getting the kids up. I was greatly relieved when she came back, and I'm pretty sure I was heavily in YouTube/sleep mode from then until Saturday. I was feeling extremely averse to any sort of activity that whole time. So, how can I make sense of these recent experiences? How can I get out of this wretched state I have found myself in? Well, the main way I can make sense of it is to see it in light of recovering from 4 traumatic patterns. When I was able to finally resolve things with Grace on Tuesday night, in a sense, I experienced the resolution of 4 main patterns, which had been causing me stress and anxiety. First, the unresolved trauma of my childhood and early adulthood, which I had not resolved when Courtney and I got married and started a family 18 years ago. That marriage and its concomitant crises added significant trauma on top of the existing unresolved trauma. That trauma was not resolved when I turned to Grace for help in late spring/early summer of this year. And in turn, that trauma was not resolved when I launched into a fairly elaborate project of reflooring the 3rd floor bathroom a couple of weeks ago. My childhood/young adult trauma had been somewhat resolved in the intervening years, and my marriage trauma had been significantly resolved during the Grace crisis, but I have never had a time free from significant trauma. All caps. Wednesday, September 4th, 3:52 p.m. So today is by far the most coherent day I had in a long time, but it's been brutal nonetheless. Maybe I could start by simply describing the day. I woke up at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night because I sort of half vomited half an hour. Just stressed and tired. Result of the fairly heavy drinking I did with Courtney yesterday evening. We had several gin and tonics together, which allowed us to pound quite a bit, which was fun because our relationship had been so brutal recently. Somewhere between last night and this morning, we came to the conclusion that Courtney can't really relate to adults who are close to her, e.g. Grace and me. So that's her project. My project is different. I can't seem to engage in my own life. The basic problem or framework for that situation is this. I'm a very sensitive, intelligent person who was raised in a crazy family situation. And since then, I found myself in various situations. Hendricken, real estate, Abyssinia, dealing with Emma, marriage to Courtney, that haven't been conducive to my sensitivity/intelligence. Okay. Thursday, September 5th, 12:07 p.m. So I woke up this morning at around 5 a.m., maybe 5:15, feeling all wound up, nervous, agitated. It was really brutal. I had no idea what was going on or why. Eventually, Courtney fed me a Klonopin. What the fuck? And I conked out till just a few minutes ago. I would love to be able to figure out what happened this morning as well as what's been happening recently in order to come up with some sort of a strategy to get out of this situation. Friday, September 20th, so 5 days later, 10:21 a.m. At the Coro Center with Grace for her annual heart checkup. To be honest, it's a fairly stressful situation for me, despite the fact that I don't have to do much of anything. I'm not particularly worried about the prospect of hearing bad news, and I've done this plenty of times before, so it's not very challenging. Something occurred to me last night as I was watching a church militant video on Freemasonry, a topic that has always been a sort of fringe conspiracy type topic for me. Freemasonry, on its face, seems patently stupid and non-threatening. It's like a douchey version of Catholicism. There's a clear hierarchy, rituals, which mostly seem like made-up garbage, a vague set of rather banal beliefs, kind of like the Boy Scouts but for adult men. But, according to this documentary, Freemasons were responsible for the French Revolution as well as the First Russian Revolution in 1917. All I can surmise from that is that it's incredibly powerful for people, especially men, to concoct and reinforce. Is that what that says? I don't know what that says. And reinforce an agenda. And the results can be annoying. And the results can be amazing. The effect is much greater than the sum of the parts involved. Also, the power of symbol and ritual, as much as we tend to write it off, and even when it seems laughable and obviously fake. What was it that I chatted with Courtney about yesterday? It was a development of the chats of our previous days, mostly having to do with models. I was fascinated by an interview with a philosopher of science who was very carefully describing how the intelligent design critiques of neo-Darwinism leave the neo-Darwinist in a very precarious position. Okay, so I haven't been able to journal much at all lately. I guess I fell into quite a bit of a funk recently. Hopefully that's beginning to change today. A big part of that funk has been a fairly intense sickness which has kind of ravished me for about a month now, but which is finally clearing itself up. But also, and perhaps more fundamentally, I think I came up against forces which rendered activity impossible psychologically. Not that I lost the will to live or anything like that. I just couldn't see how to approach my life and found myself on the outs of my own life and couldn't see a way back in. Last night I had a series of dreams in which everything seemed to be going crazy, but I was inclined to just hang in there and make the best of it. And that's what I'm feeling like this morning as well. Next day, Thursday, October 3rd, 4:26 p.m. It never seems to end. I wake up every morning with exhaustion, agitation, and fear. Then usually I'm able to get back to sleep. ... Next week, Tuesday, October 8th, 7:37 a.m. Things seem to be going slightly better, though it seems bleak still. But I'm not 100% swimming in chaos all the time. But it's difficult. I had a really good conversation with Courtney yesterday where we tried to establish a narrative. That conversation... Thursday, October 17th, 8:01 p.m. Sitting in bed... Sorry. Sitting in bed with Grace in the nearby armchair. I have to admit to feeling somewhat flabbergasted by Grace telling me that Courtney checked up on her in the morning, out of the blue, when she was totally bleary-eyed and trying to get herself together for school. Saturday, October 19th, 3:20 p.m. Okay, so I'm finding myself in an okay place, certainly much better than I've been in a few days. 3 days later, Tuesday, October 22nd, 6:45 p.m. Just went and picked up Grace from her last tennis match of the regular season. I want to document a couple of things right off the bat. Number one, first, I am experiencing, once again, the achy, fevery feelings in my bones that I experienced, 9:49 a.m. 2 days later, October 24th, 9:49 a.m. So I'm sort of blindly plunging back into journaling here. I woke up this morning with a lot of anxiety. Last night I asked Courtney to help me get out of bed and start engaging with life again. Let me take a step back and identify the essential problem here. On the one hand, I feel a tremendous compassion for where I'm at. I've obviously experienced enormous crosses in my life, crosses which have made it extremely difficult to remain engaged in life. One way of saying this, I am, by nature, an extremely sensitive and intelligent person who has experienced, this is like a bullet list, growing up in an extremely disordered and dysfunctional family, being introduced to a harsh Calvinistic version of God at an extremely vulnerable time in my life, puberty, a soul-destroying, alienating, atheistic culture as a young person in the 1980s, a confusing college experience culminating in a tragic and devastating failure, teaching in a crazy Catholic environment at Hendricken, marriage to someone with huge anger issues, several real estate nightmares / money nightmares with Pop, taking in Courtney's grandmother, another nightmare, starting and running a nightmare business for 5 years, trying to finally resolve my marriage, only to have my soul thrown into deep disarray in doing so. Parentheses, the most recent debacle. I'm just going to use this as a little bookmark.